Hello, everyone in the tiny homes world. I'm calling in from the Brisbane Tiny Homes Expo in Australia. Um, I'm chatting to you from my phone. I'll just give you a quick look around. I'm at this expo where there's hundreds of tiny homes, and there's going to be the gates will be opening in about half an hour, and there'll be thousands of people coming through here checking out all these tiny homes. And I'm doing a few presentations here about wastewater management in tiny homes, composting toilets, greywater recycling, all that sort of stuff. Basically, I'm here to talk about the same sort of stuff that I'm talking about here in this little presentation. So I'm doing this from my phone. I don't know if I can see people's comments and questions. I can't see anything at this stage, but I'll do my best to keep things on topic. I don't know. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I've just seen a couple of comments come through. Hey, Kimberly from Canada. So great. So I can see those comments, and when we get to the end of the session, I can answer a few questions. So yeah, look, quick introduction on myself. My name's Anthony Smith. I run this off-grid sort of wastewater management business called Waterwally. Main focus with the work I do is in consultancy. I do a lot of work, or most of my focus is with natural passive types of wastewater management systems. Yeah, I work with a whole range of different systems, like I said, from composting toilets to greywater systems, with septic tanks, with aerated wastewater treatment systems, reed bed systems. There's a whole range of different natural passive wastewater management systems that I do a bit of work with. And my involvement in the tiny homes industry has grown a lot over the past, particularly the past 5 years. It's I guess the niche sort of area that I work in this off-grid wastewater management stuff that's relatively scalable. So we can do big systems, we can do small systems. Is why I think my involvement in the tiny homes industry has grown quite a lot because of the scalability of things. We can implement systems that are suited to tiny home usage, to small scale usage. So look, anyone who is into or looking into the idea of tiny home living, one of the biggest hurdles often is, and one of the biggest things that people get a bit stumped on and wonder about is what to do with wastewater, or what toilet am I going to have, and how am I going to manage that side of my tiny life, or tiny lifestyle, and tiny home, tiny building. And look, the way that I like to try to describe this to people, and I do exactly the same. I'll be giving the exact same sort of spiel later on at this Tiny Homes Expo. Is that firstly to recognise that there is no one size fits all. There's no best solution. It's quite a variable thing, and there is really I like to try to simplify things as much as possible. And look, this area, or this this topic around wastewater management, particularly in tiny homes, can be a little bit complex. It's not rocket science, but there's a little bit to it. So wherever possible, I try to simplify things, to make it easy to navigate as much as possible. And what I've found, we can simplify things down to three main components or factors that are really worth considering or thinking about when you're trying to look for the most suitable wastewater management or toilet system for your particular tiny home and your needs. And those three things are, firstly, the tiny home and its people. So I'll talk about these in a little bit more detail, but essentially I'm talking about, firstly, starting at the starting point, which is having to think about what is the structure that we're starting with, who's going to be living in it, and ultimately that is going to dictate how much wastewater we're generating or what type of wastewater we're generating. So that's a starting point. We've got to have a bit of a think about that to start with. Secondly is the site and soil conditions that a tiny home is going to be situated or located on. So that's something that also needs a decent bit of consideration, and often doesn't get the consideration it really should. And then the third component is regulation, and it might be local government or state government regulations that may or may not apply. So we've got a bit of a balancing act between those three factors, and now looking at them in a little bit more detail. Factor number one, what I'm getting at there, like I said, we're trying to identify what the wastewater stream is, or what waste is going to be produced, and this is quite a variable thing, and I'm going to give a couple of examples, and just to clarify, these are just examples. There may be plenty of other variables specific to your particular situation, but I'm just going to give a couple of examples to illustrate the point. So one example might be, we're trying to identify in the tiny home itself, the structure itself, what are the fixtures that we've got? Have we got bathroom, laundry, toilet, kitchen, all of the above? Or are we potentially looking at a tiny home that doesn't have a kitchen, for example? And if that's the case, the most suitable wastewater management solution may be different. If we're not generating kitchen water in that particular example, the most suitable wastewater management system or most suitable wastewater management setup might be different if we did or did not have a kitchen, for example. Another thing, and again, just another example might be, let's identify what's the water supply, and that could play a significant role. If we have access to a reticulated water supply, and water supply is not so much of an issue, that might influence our decision, versus if we were in a standalone scenario where the water supply is a tank and catchment off the roof, and then we might start to consider waterless toilet options, composting toilet or incinerating toilet, because then we can reduce the amount of water that we're using, and hence reduce the size, volume, capacity of the water tank. So we might be able to save some money by reducing our water supply infrastructure by using waterless waste management infrastructure. Again, just examples. Another one, and that was talking about the structure itself, but also another important one to consider is who's living in the tiny home. Are we talking about one person, 4 people? Are they living it full time? Are we talking about a tiny home that's set up for tourism accommodation purposes, and it's only used on the weekends? Or are we setting up a tiny home that's only going to be used periodically? Or have we got 4 people living in it full time? The point I'm making, I hope you're getting the point that I'm making, is that those things are going to play a pretty big role in how much wastewater is produced, and also what type or what's the what's the ingredients in that wastewater produced. So, you know, we need to have a think about that before we can even consider what the best solution is. You know, it makes sense, but it often doesn't get. People often sort of jump into this, just trying to look for the best solution without considering, hang on, we need to understand what we're working with before we can start looking at the solutions. So that's factor number one. And then factor number two that I mentioned was understanding site and soil conditions. So this is where we are trying to identify. So let me take a step back from that and say, an interesting thing here is that, you know, in most scenarios, when we're talking about on-site wastewater management, and let me clarify this too, what I'm talking about here is on-site wastewater management. If we're in a scenario where we've got a reticulated sewage available, you know, a sewage line, it's almost always the most suitable, practical, cost-effective solution to connect to that sewage line. So when we're looking at wastewater management options for tiny homes and talking about it in more detail, just to clarify, we're talking about off-grid or unsewered areas, and we're needing to find an on-site wastewater management solution. And now when we're talking about on-site wastewater management solutions, we're almost always going to be discharging water to the soil in one way or another. So we're essentially using our site and our soil as part of our wastewater management system, our wastewater management setup. So obviously, you know, that's why I'm trying to say it makes sense to have a think about the site and soil conditions that we've got to work with. And just one other quick clarification here is the only exception to that, you know, using the site and soil as part of your wastewater management setup, is if you were to be capturing your waste, say with a cassette toilet, a caravan type toilet, and say a holding tank or another type of holding tank where we're not processing the waste, we're not discharging the waste, we're really just collecting it and taking it off site. You know, that can be a suitable solution in some scenarios, but you know, that's sort of not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about on-site wastewater management solutions and on-site wastewater management, not wastewater capture and off-site. Hey, Jason. So where were they going with all that? Oh yeah, sorry. With your site and soil conditions, this is something that often, well, very often doesn't get given the consideration that it really should. And there's two main reasons why considering your considering your site and soil conditions is really valuable. Firstly, we can identify the limitations of the site, and we've got, I don't know how many of you guys out there watching this have been following on and watching other of the presentations. But I watched Richard yesterday from Cuddy talking about you know, his composting toilet and his presentation on whether or how to identify whether a composting toilet is a suitable solution. If you're watching this, g'day Richard, good to see you. Anyway, I remember him mentioning something about clay soils, and that is an example of a limitation. So, you know, it's worth identifying that. And there could be others, you know, that might be proximity to a waterway. It might be a high water table. It might be the slope. Again, they're just some examples, and there might be others, but you know, those are potential limitations to what we can and can't do with our wastewater management. And again, I'm talking about ultimately at some point discharging wastewater to that site and to that soil. So we're looking at those limitations. And now look, that's sort of a bit of a negative, you know, it's looking at the bad stuff. But there's a flip side to that. I mean, it's looking at the bad stuff, but it's also a positive thing for you to be able to identify those limitations so that, you know, what you try to implement is going to work, and it's not going to have an impact on the environment or be a public health risk or whatever. Morning, Joe. How are you? Yeah, good. And then the flip side of that is also identifying the value that your site might be able to bring. So, you know, firstly, we're looking at the limitations, but we can also identify what value our site and soil conditions have to us in our wastewater management system. An example of that could be, let's say over here somewhere. I'm trying to squeeze my hand into the little screen box that I'm working with here. If we identified over here that there's a nice, say, loamy soil, and we could maybe send a sample off to a laboratory to see what the nutrient retentive capabilities of that soil is. Look, you know, you don't need to go to that level of detail, but these are just examples, and what the value of that might be is that right now we've identified, great, this site over here has a good wastewater treatment capacity. So then we can go, great, we know that this little piece of land over here on our site has got good wastewater management conditions, and the value in that might be to say, well, now we know that we've got some soil over here which has got good wastewater treatment capabilities. We don't need to be considering other whiz-bang expensive wastewater treatment systems, because we can utilise the naturally existing wastewater treatment capacities of our soil. So you see what the point I'm trying to get at here is, that there can be some real value if you look at what condition your site and soil has that can be of benefit to you and your wastewater management system. Just seeing if I can, I don't know if I can see what the time is here. Oh, hang on. You still got me there? 8:50, I got 10 minutes left. Oh yeah, cool. You still got me. Right, so yeah, look, time flies when you're having fun. So that was factor number 2. And factor number 3 is local government regulations. And now, look, this might be a tricky one for me to comment on because things vary a lot. I'm in Australia, obviously, and the regulatory framework around wastewater management and tiny homes is different here than it might be in the States or wherever you're watching from. But one thing that's probably common across the board is there's value in firstly identifying what regulations exist, but also identifying of those regulations which ones apply to your particular scenario. And I certainly find in Australia anyway that particularly in the tiny home movement where regulations, I don't know if it's the same in the States or not, but the regulations around tiny homes hasn't really caught up with what people are doing. So ultimately the outcome of that is that people get left with 2 choices. One is to comply with the regulations, which often means that you you end up with an over-engineered, oversized wastewater management system that's not quite suitable for your tiny home, or you don't worry about the regulations, you go under the radar and just go rogue. And now, look, I'm all for breaking the rules. It can be good fun, but you know, it does sort of leave things open to some potential dramas. You know, if you don't have those regulatory guidelines directing people on how to do things, there is that potential risk of, you know, people unknowingly doing the wrong thing and maybe doing things that might have an impact on public health or the environment or whatever. And it also opens things up to potentially people being misled or even ripped off by manufacturers selling products because there's no regulatory framework dictating you know, the quality of things and the most, you know, and the suitability of things. So I guess the take-home message with all of that is, you know, if you are working outside of the regulations, my advice really is, you know, there's a greater responsibility on you as the tiny homeowner to have a solid understanding of how all this stuff works, do your homework, and make sure that what you are trying to do is going to be sustainable and you know, work long term. So I reckon we've probably only got about 5 minutes left. I'll see how I go. I can see comments pop up on the bottom of the screen. So does anyone, oh, and sorry, one thing I wanted to do really quickly is just show off this this jar of composted poo. Ew! This jar of poo's been all around Australia many times, Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, Perth, all over the place. It's quite a famous jar of poo. As far as I know, it's the most well-travelled jar of composted poo in the world, and it'll be meeting thousands of people throughout the course of this weekend. So I thought I'd introduce it to you guys too. Now, yeah, fire away. I don't know how long we've got left, but if anyone's got any questions, let me know. I've seen plant bogs designed to purify the water through their root systems. Yeah, me too. Where are we? Sorry, I don't know if you guys can still see me. I can't see the screen, but if someone can still see me, can you? Oh, yeah, cool. All right, well, look, I can't see you, but I can see the comments. So has anyone got any questions? Someone mentioned that they've seen bog plants or bog pits designed that purify water through their root systems. Yeah, look, that's quite a common type of wastewater management system where we're utilising a whole range of different components, but one component is the plant roots that have you know, different little rootlets and surface area for microbes and stuff to live on, and that's similar to a reed bed type of wastewater treatment system, or also known as a constructed wetland. So that's, you know, a natural and quite effective wastewater treatment system. We got other questions coming through?
Anthony, yeah, someone up a little higher was wondering about, let's see, they said, working on building out a sustainable mixed development using a wastewater management system, modular, scalable, renewable energies with alternatives for smaller units. And then they said, let's see, what other alternatives for smaller individual units, systems that feed into a bigger system for repurposing secondary byproducts, greywater, energy, ash for concrete using gasification, engineering clean emission. That was kind of a long one, but I think they're basically wondering if there's alternative systems for repurposing some of the secondary byproducts from waste.
Yeah, it's a big question, but the answer is yeah. Look, you know, what you can do with waste and wastewater is really within reason, limitless. You can implement systems that treat water to a standard where it could be reused for drinking. If I mean, one possible option, and there'd be a lot of input and infrastructure involved in doing something to that extent, but it's certainly possible. And also with managing solid waste, there's a whole range of ways you can manage solid waste, and this is not new stuff. This is like you can find examples of people either composting solid waste and using it as fertilizer. There's examples of people managing waste in anaerobic conditions to create methane and utilizing that as a resource. Ultimately, we sort of need to recognize that we've got two resources here. One is the water, and the second is the nutrient dense human waste. So if one thing you can do to start with potentially is keep those two things separate, and that can make managing those resources easier. But if you've got a combined waste system, then there are methods that you can implement to again separate those resources and put them to good use in one way or another. So the answer is yeah, that stuff can be done, and it's open to your imagination really, and just finding ways to make stuff happen. But it's all possible.
Awesome.
Yeah, no worries. That's a pretty vague answer to the question, but that's all I could do there.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Sweet, man. We'll really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and hope the expo goes awesome. And yeah, man, I think everyone really enjoyed it. Lots of good intel for sure.
Yeah, great. Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And yeah, the gates have opened, so everyone started rolling in. Yes, I'm assuming you can still see, but yeah, here we go. It's on.
There we go. Looks like a fun one.
Yeah. Thanks for having us, you guys. And yeah, I hope that was somewhat useful. And have a good one, hey? Good luck with the rest of it all.
Sounds good. Appreciate it, Anthony. Cheers, man.
Okay. I'll see you later.